imagination of the,
Sorry about that.
it's okay. Uh, Whether it's the imagination of the screenwriter or the director, but these motifs, the eyes and the reflections and the merry-go-round horses, keep coming back round and round. Um, what else did you guys notice?
Well, I did not realize it was based on an Arthur Miller book. But once you said that, many of his plays, there's always the strong woman.
Mhm.
In All My Sons, and Death of a Salesman,
Yeah,
etc. And you saw the strong woman at the very, very end when the girlfriend joins him.
yeah,
And I find that in his plays they have a larger role. That it's a
right.
very dynamic speech that they
Yeah.
give.
And she throughout the movie has a kind of a practicality outlook that, until that moment, which is sort of a shift for her.
Right.
I'm, you have to go to this meeting or we have to run, right? She's very practical about looking at this and more worldly in a sense than he is about, understanding the situation
Right.
that they find themselves in. So yeah, so you can certainly see why the actress was attracted to the role, right? Likely to be better than a lot of things that she was offered, like running from dinosaurs in high heels, so it's a little different than her role in Jurassic Park. So, is it Elaine?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the ending. I always had a feeling that they went to the police department and the policeman kept stalling him and stalling them. And I had a feeling he was never really going to write it up.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, I think the movie leaves us, with that impression, right? Is anything going to change because of what they've just done? It's not really clear, right? And I think I like that about this movie, right? That it doesn't have that easy ending that, well, now Petey's going to get arrested for rape and murder, and you know, things in the neighborhood are going to change, right? So the only thing that really changes is what changes inside the two of them, that they come to identify with the ones who are persecuted rather than with the persecutors, right? They go from being bystanders to upstanders, which is sort of the language that we talk about today, about for a significant part of the movie. It starts with that horrific scene, he witnesses a rape and murder essentially, and doesn't do anything about it, right? Which he's troubled by it as the movie goes on, but this idea of getting out of line and doing something that will mark him in the community, he's not willing to do that. He'd rather be a bystander, and so the only thing that really changes at the end is he's not willing to be a bystander anymore. So you can decide whether you think ultimately, yeah, the bureaucracy of the police department will eventually get to making something better in the neighborhood. But there's also, that the police officer looks at the two of them and says, so it's just the two of you guys on that block, right? You
Well,
and the Finkelsteins. Yeah.
I think that part of it was he didn't get involved in the beginning because it didn't affect him directly.
Right.
And then after a while, things happened to him also. Like the white supremacists next door, they dumped the garbage on his
Yeah.
lawn. Otherwise, maybe he would have just continued on the way he was. He knew it was wrong, but he
Hmm.
didn't want to make waves about it.
Right.
Rabbi, I got the impression in the beginning, but I may be wrong, when he was first looking out the blinds and observing what was going on, she almost looked like somebody for hire. I don't want to say but she looked like she may have been a prostitute with him. She certainly didn't deserve to die in any case.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
thought that he thought that that's what was going on, that the woman was sort of teasing the man, and he
Yeah.
didn't look at it as an innocent person being raped.
Right.
I didn't
Not
think
to
it looked
start
like
with,
that.
right? But of course, when he starts hearing, that she was attacked so horrifically and in a coma,
Right.
the stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it's not his business. I think there was Brenda who said it didn't affect him directly, and I'm so there's a famous story. It happened long after this book was published. It was the
Right.
early '60s, I think, right? The Kitty Genovese
Yeah,
story.
right, Katie Genevieve, right.
All the people in an apartment building in New York City who saw and heard the screams and didn't call the police, didn't want to get involved, right? Um, so it's a thing, for human beings to stop being a bystander and start standing up for something. I think, Sue, are you waving your hand?
Yeah, Susan Wellach.
So I want to go back to the beginning of the movie.
Mhm.
And as much as I know that William Macy is a wonderful actor who's won so many awards, I think to cast him as somebody who is supposed to look Jewish because he puts on a pair of glasses is completely unbelievable.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just don't get it. And
Mhm.
for the fact that he was peeking out his window and seeing these things and doing absolutely nothing, even a person without high morals and everything would, if you could see a rape in progress, my God, it reminds me today of if you see something or hear something, do something.
Right.
And he did absolutely nothing. And to me, that speaks to a very low caliber of character.
Yeah.
And for me, I thought this was difficult to watch. It was the second time I'd seen it because I saw it originally. And then I watched it again just over the weekend to remind myself. And for me, there's a lot of it that was just not believable.
Yeah.
Just not.
Well, unfortunately, people seeing something and not doing something is all too believable.
Yeah.
That part's really believable. But I
Yeah.
agree with you about the casting and the contrivance of the plot.
Yeah.
That everything revolves around is hard to swallow. And like I said, but I can't imagine what actor you would hire who could do that. Where they don't look Jewish without glasses, but they put on glasses and they look like Groucho Marx. I mean, I'm just not sure, you know, how do you actually make that work in a movie? And maybe you could make it work in a novel in a way that you couldn't,
How about somebody like Jeff Goldblum? Or
Yeah.
I can think of lots of
Yeah.
people that have
Yeah.
been cast in that role who would come off as looking
Yeah.
Jewish.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes, but he wouldn't not look Jewish when he doesn't have the glasses on, right? I
That's
mean,
ridiculous.
well, that's the problem, right? So there's I think we have to agree that that's a basic problem
Yeah.
with this movie, right? But I do think it's actually, I think it's an insoluble problem, really, when that it might be something that works in a novel that doesn't work in
Work in the book.
when you actually have to see people, right? Um, but we could spend some time recasting it if you want to see who you think might have done it better, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with his acting in this movie. I mean, I think he is a good actor. I mean, in a character that goes from hugely unsympathetic, in that opening, could you be less sympathetic a character than a guy who just stands there and watches that, through the slats of the window, So I see Gail.
Gail.
Well, I have some different views of Macy and this character. I think he is portrayed at the beginning as a character person, for lack of a better term, a Mr. Milquetoast. He sort of lives with his mother, he listens to her demands, and he does nothing about any of that, which would be just the way he viewed the crime scene, the rape. He's afraid to get involved. He's just
Yeah.
not, his character just doesn't do that. And as the movie progresses, he becomes a little more assertive. He becomes a little more sure of himself, if that's the right word, where
Yeah.
until at the end, he decides to do something. At the beginning, he just didn't have the
Right.
ability to do that. And his job was something where he was just a meaningless person in an office,
Yeah.
even though it was a titled position. And I think that that was a perfect example of who he was at the beginning and how this person developed into somebody more substantial. So I liked him in the movie, in the role. I had a lot of trouble watching the movie. I found it very disturbing, but I didn't mind that he was cast as the person who would just be who he was in the movie. So I somewhat disagree with Sue on who could watch something and not take steps to write that. He
People do it
didn't
all the
take any
time.
steps to write any of it until well into the movie.
Right. But we do see a character arc, right? I mean, as
Yes.
it starts to
Yeah.
affect him personally, again, as Brenda was saying, as his job becomes threatened, you know, the glasses themselves become a kind of a metaphor, right?
Huh?
It's not just that he puts on the glasses and now he looks Jewish. He puts on
Right.
the glasses and now he can see. He starts to see
Oh,
the hypocrisy, you know, he starts to see what's going on around him in a way that he hadn't seen before that. And so, and once seen, things like that can't be unseen. So, so there's a kind of an awakening that comes once his eyes are opened, right? And then I mentioned before that there are several returns to these close-ups of his eyes and his reflection and the way he sees himself. I think there's the scene where they go off for a weekend in the country is pretty pivotal too. I mean, in his development and you know, his reaction to being turned away from that first resort. Again, we have to buy the absurdity of he's been there before, but now he looks Jewish, right? But you know, so if you can buy that, then his reaction, which is, you know, his first thing is we're going home. I can't go through this again. You know, and then they go to a restaurant somewhere and he orders clams deliberately so that you know, people will know he's not Jewish, right? He'll have 2 orders of clams. But you know, he kind of goes through this until he says, there's a motel, we're gonna go there, right? He's gonna try again, right? And he's but for his character though, there is this indignation through most of the movie that people think that he's Jewish, right?
Yeah.
You know, he's shouting about show you my do you want to see my baptism certificate and stuff like this, right? You know, so at one and the same time is there is a kind of a character arc. There's also this kind of, I mean, he just feels it's a gross injustice that he's being considered to be a Jew, right? And then that moment in the police station at the end when so it's just the two of you, you know, and it's not that he's, you know, that's the last step in the awakening, right? You know, in seeing what's going on.
mhm.
So
Rabbi,
yes.
you know, I think it wasn't so much that he didn't do anything that night when he looked through the blinds. I think he thought that she was a lady of the night, that it wasn't a rape, but it was when the man started beating her, he saw then the violence. And it took maybe 6 or 8 weeks while she was in the hospital and she wasn't getting any better, she was in a coma, that what he was so guilty of is that he knew who did it to her. Nobody else knew exactly who did it to her. And he could have told, he could have been a witness. And he didn't speak up until that very last scene. What I thought
I
he
do
was,
think, by the way, several of the other neighbors, including his neighbor next door, knows exactly what happened.
oh, maybe
Uh,
so.
They talk on the train in the morning after, you know.
But the thing that I couldn't quite understand was her role, Laura Dern's role. I mean, the way she walked in looking for a job with her legs all exposed and in, you know, the 40s, I mean, that was her whole way of dress through the whole movie and that walk and everything. I mean, it was almost above and beyond ladylike.
Yeah.
I don't know why they would think that that looked Jewish. I don't know why that kept on coming up.
So I think, you know, again, we can talk about casting and whatever. And by the way, you know, the the book's written in 1945, long before Arthur Miller meets Marilyn Monroe. But I think that the filmmakers, there's a little bit of Marilyn Monroe creeping into that characterization, I think. You know, but I do think that, you know, what her character is that maybe resonates with Jewishness is a free spirit, right?
Yeah.
That he's not maybe as buttoned down and locked down as you know, the wife in the kitchen, you know, and stuff, you know, of those days, right? So there may be something going on with that. The characterization that she wants, she's a would-be actress. She went out to Hollywood to make it in the movies, didn't make it. But that sort of free-spiritedness, you know, the fact that it comes out later that she actually lived with a man, you know, before she marries him and stuff. I mean, she is a different kind of woman than he's ever met before, certainly. Um, so how
But
that
she's
gets
one of my favorite actresses. I thought she was terrific. It was just a little bit over the top. But the telling scene was at that resort they went to when they showed the sign and at the bottom in small print was restricted.
Right.
That was it.
That's right. Yeah. Which the movie is careful not to show the first time it shows the sign for the place. And it's not till they're leaving the place that it focuses in on the word restricted on the sign. There are some lovely scenes here between the two of them, I think. I mean, you know, there aren't a lot of actors in this movie, really. It's very small budget and stuff like that. But there's sort of courting scene in the park where they end up standing in the water feature together.
Right.
You know, dancing. I think, you know, it's in some ways it feels like it's dropped in from another movie, but it's really it's a lovely little scene, right? That is played so nicely, and it's a really good example of what movies can be in terms of explaining motivation and emotion, you know, without having to have like a voiceover narrator tell you stuff, which is one of my bugaboos about movies. I in general, if there is a narrator, I don't like it. So,
Rabbi,
yeah.
it's Marilyn. I lost your screen, so I can't raise my hand, but can I speak?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I agree with Sue about what she had said, and I think that I was very disappointed at the end when he didn't report the rape because this killer is still on the block and he's still not focusing on the right from wrong. And I think there's a parable there. There was so much, so layered with so much focusing. The cinematography was fabulous and focusing on this and focusing on that. But with or without his glasses, he never really was focusing, and he really didn't need glasses. The reason they told him to put on the glasses because he hired a Jew. Didn't you read the name?
Right.
And why did you hire that person? So you better get glasses. And he was so precise and he was so nerdy And he did whatever he was told to do. So he went out and he bought glasses. And even his mother told him, you look like a Jew. I never knew in my whole lifetime that if you wear glasses, you look like a Jew. I know we're intelligent people and we read a lot, and maybe our eyes have been used, but I've heard of noses and I've heard of loud people who talk a certain way or act a certain way. I have never heard of glasses making you look like a Jew.
Yeah.
And you know how many people in the world wear glasses and how many people would look like Jews? And I thought that he had the chance, he never took those glasses off. So I like what you shared about when he put them on, it changed the little bit of the depth.
Right.
He could have taken those glasses off, and he didn't need them because he only put them on because he hired a Jew.
Right.
And so I thought it was interesting, the word focus. You know, when you focus on something, you see the light.
I disagree, but I'm not gonna go ahead and talk.
Yeah, you see the light of the day. When you focus on something, you hone in on something. There was some times when he focused, but he never really focused until it affected him. And so I was very disappointed at the end. I know you said you liked the fact that he didn't talk about, is it Fred who raped the young woman? And the fact that she was Hispanic, she too was a minority group. And they looked at her just as they look at Jews. And so they didn't care about her, whether she was trampy or not trampy or whatever. She was raped, she was killed. He knew it. How could he live with himself? I don't think that showed a very good character. He knew that she died because they told him.
Right. I mean, it's part of what
But he could do it again. That crazy neighbor could do it to his wife.
He went in at the end and reported it.
Right. He says it when he goes to the police.
Oh, I thought he only reported about Mr. Finkelstein.
No,
I didn't hear that. Oh, okay.
And the neighbor is named Petey, the one who
Petey.
raped and murdered.
I was afraid of him just looking at him on the street.
Yeah, and the next door neighbor, the one played by Meatloaf, is I think that's a solid character part there. That he's been in a couple of movies that, I mean, he's probably best known for being Eddie in Rocky Horror Picture Show, but he was in the movie Fight Club and a couple of other things over the years too, and so has done some pretty memorable little character roles. And I think this one is, you know, he's at the top of his game in this kind of quietly insidious neighbor. You know,
well, and I thought
anything explicitly, you know, but he makes it pretty clear what it's going to mean if you don't show up for the meeting.
Right. And my favorite line which was so telling, and with the title Focus, which was really what I focused on, was when Mr. Finkelstein had him look into his eyes and say, what do you see when you look at me? And then he looked away and he still couldn't focus.
Yeah. I mean, he's getting better as the movie goes on, but he's
if Mr. Finkelstein hadn't saved his life, I don't know if he would have gotten better.
Yeah. And you know, I just want to say something else about glasses. So I don't know about glasses making us look Jewish, but there's no question that they are a symbol of being an intellectual.
Yes.
Into the you know, that intellectualism can be associated with Judaism.
That's what I said. We're well read and we're intelligent, but I don't think it makes you look Jewish.
No,
there's a reference there, but most of the world wears glasses. And one day I went shopping with my best friend, one of my best friends who is Catholic. She's Italian. And we went in her neighborhood shopping, and we walked in and she was purchasing something, and the lady said to her, oh, you have a nice friend. And she looked at me and she said, you're a nice Catholic girl. And my friend said, oh no, she's a nice Jewish girl. And the woman said, she doesn't look Jewish. My friend handed her back the scarf and said, and what does a Jew look like? And she threw the scarf back and we walked out.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I really resent when people do that, when people say, I mean, we can pretty much tell because people have come from different parts of the world. But I just think that that's not focusing on the right things. I mean, in this world, and that's part of this focusing.
Right. Well,
Al Erlbacher.
that's the point.
That line that Marilyn was referring to, and you too, Rabbi,
Yeah.
not per word, comes right out of the Merchant of Venice. In
Yeah.
his,
Yes.
am I not?
Hath not a Jew eye, right?
Right.
You know? Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'm sure that that Arthur Miller was very cognizant of that, right?
Sure would.
I wouldn't be surprised if that isn't part of, the underlying choice for everything that he does in the book and that we see in the movie, right? Hath not a Jew eyes, right? The Merchant of Venice. Yeah. So I think that's, and the way the movie continually shows eyes,
Yes,
right?
yes. It's a real
Particularly
parable to focus. Yeah. I thought
Yeah.
the cinematography was really good. And even the coloration of the filmmaking was so, although it wasn't realistic, the little houses were cookie cutter and too red. I mean, it wasn't as realistic. It looked, the setting looked almost like a Disneyland setting of the block.
Yeah, I don't know if it was filmed on location or not, to be honest. But my guess is, when I lived in New York, there are a lot of neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Queens that look quite a bit like that. So, and that
I've
seems,
never seen anything like that where it's perfect, exactly every home, that same brick.
so the next time you're in New York, go to Midwood in Brooklyn and take a look around.
Oh.
Yeah, I see Maxine waving her hand there. You got to unmute.
Maxine and then Nancy. Maxine, go ahead. I unmuted you.
You know what? There are neighborhoods in Chicago. Those brick houses look just like Chicago bungalows. That's exactly what they look like. They're brick on the outside. They have that little porch and they have dark green front doors.
Yeah.
So you don't have to go to New York. Just go.
Right,
Chicago.
where I grew up in Chicago on the west side, that's what the houses look like.
Exactly.
Well, I've seen that configuration, but I've never, with every house, the exact same brick. I mean, I usually see a variation of coloration of brick, but I've never seen a block where every house is exactly the same brick.
Yeah. Well, they exist out there, I can assure you. The downside to watching these movies on Amazon is they tend to cut out before you see the credits. So, which is very annoying to me. It's very hard to get back to the credits and figure out where it was actually filmed, which would be interesting to know whether it's a set or whether it's actually a neighborhood. Yeah. I think you said Nancy and
Yeah, Nancy Cullum.
It was filmed in Toronto.
Okay.
Oh.
Great.
And
So you got did you get to the credits and that's how you know, or do you know?
Well, I IMDb, but also if you stay, the credits come through, but it's at the end. It's thanking the film, the film industry of Toronto or the association or whatever. Yeah. One of the other things that I thought was very interesting is that when Macy goes to can't remember the name of the anti-Semitic group, nobody else in that crowd is wearing glasses.
Union Crusaders.
Union Crusaders, thank you.
Yeah.
Nobody else is wearing glasses, just as a by the by.
Right. And these groups, these neighborhood groups totally exist and existed.
They do.
Back in those days, for sure. The history of Deerfield has a lot to tell us about that.
Kenilworth.
Kenilworth, so this is that thing where are you willing to go against your neighbors who have formed a mob, right? And what are you willing to do? You know, are you willing to stand out, right? And I will say there are wonderful stories, and we know stories of communities where people do stop being bystanders. So you may remember the story of there was a town in Montana, Billings, Montana,
Yes.
where 20,000 people or something. That's and in a town the size of Billings, that's a huge number. Put Hanukkah menorahs in their windows because some Jews had been singled out for persecution in Billings, right? And so, remember in Paris when that magazine was bombed, Charlie Hebdo, and the big slogan was "Je suis Charlie." We are all Charlie, right? So people do sometimes stand up against these mobs, and it's pretty important for us to be thinking about this right now, I think.
QB, go ahead.
I just had a thing about when that came, Northbrook too, when we first moved out here, the agent said, we didn't buy a house, we rented. And she said, I don't think you'll be comfortable here.
Yeah.
And then so we didn't find any problem, but what convinced me we would be comfortable is we living in a townhouse, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the back door, and the guy says, hi, I'm Rabbi, I can't remember his name. He says, how come you're turning your lights on Friday night? I said, okay, I guess we're okay here.
Yeah. 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 Neighborhoods do change, and attitudes can change, and that it's, but considering this movie was made at a moment when people were concerned about a backlash to the liberal 1990s with the Clinton administration, which hardly seems liberal in retrospect. And now we're in one of these periods again as this retreat from Obama and Biden, and so, vigilance on this front is important for us, and committing ourselves to not be bystanders, whether it's happening to Jews or happening to other people. I mean, we have to be with the people who stand up, right? So silence is acceptance.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. I can tell you that my immigrant justice groups have certainly, their meetings have flared up in recent weeks. So I'll be attending some of that stuff. What needs to be done as the new administration comes into power.
They announced it here. They talked about here.
Our next movie is December 3rd, and it is Denial. A great story, and many of us know Deborah Lipstadt. I'm not sure that Rachel Weisz, I think of Deborah Lipstadt, I think of Rachel Weisz, but it was a great movie, and I look forward to watching it again.
She's actually got the hair and the voice down.
She does.
No.
She does.
Yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
It's Marilyn. I think if anybody had to fear living on that block, it was Mr. Finkelstein. And I think he was the hero because he knew what he was facing, and he faced it knowing that his life was in jeopardy, and he stood up for who he believed he was, and he was the strongest character in the whole movie.
Yeah, well, and there's a really great scene when William Macy goes to see him and tells him, sort of like what Hubie was saying, I don't think you're comfortable. You'll be comfortable here.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You should move, and, he says, where should I go? Right.
Right. There is nowhere.
Yeah.
So, all in all, I think definitely a movie worth seeing, definitely should be on our list of real Jewish classics. Most of us, I think, voiced the conundrum of how to cast it. There is this sort of basic suspension of disbelief, right? That you have to that he looks one way one day and looks different to everybody the next day is a really difficult thing to imagine, but that's what books and movies and everything else, they all ask us to suspend our disbelief a little bit. Some do it more successfully than others. It's no more hard to believe than, that dinosaurs can run around on Jurassic Park, right?
Also, his name, Lawrence
I was just
Newman,
gonna say
could be
Newman. His name
taken
was
different
more,
way.
right, his name was more telling than his facial features.
Yeah, Newman, right? I mean,
Newman.
and her name too, right, is Hart.
Was
Right.
she supposed to be Jewish or not? I was a little
No, I don't
confused.
think so.
No,
she's not
no, she-
hiding with Jewish.
no.
No, she's just more used to being mistaken for Jewish than he
For
is.
Jewish. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, those names are definitely symbolic, right? That he's Newman and capable, we hope, of becoming a new man, right? And she is Hart. She brings, first of all, love to his heart.
Right, exactly.
That's
Changed the whole movie.
right. That's his first
She's
step
got
into not being a bystander or a milk toast.
hands can't stay off her
First
face.
step is seeing her and starting by fantasizing about her and then finding her and so on, right? So that's a first step to bringing him into the world. So we didn't really
Tim?
come to Driving Miss Daisy, but I think that there's a reason I put the two together, and for me, both of them have something to do with the watchful eye of Community around the main characters. Remember the scenes at the beginning of Driving Miss Daisy when everybody's watching as they pull her car out of the neighbor's yard, right? And so there's a sense of what you do in public and what you're willing to do in public and what face of yourself you're willing to show to others. So I think there's some interesting parallels there. Frankly, I think the very first movie we watched years ago during COVID was Gentleman's Agreement. So, which was the first one of the first Hollywood movies that even mentioned the word anti-Semitism. But there's an interesting thing there. There, it's sort of the opposite. Gregory Peck is not Jewish and pretends to be Jewish to see what it's like to be Jewish in the business world. Here we have someone who's not Jewish, who's mistaken for being Jewish in the business world, but there's some interesting parallels to be had there too. Okay, I think we need to stop. So it's good to see you all, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Have a happy Thanksgiving to those I don't see between now and then. And we'll see the week after Thanksgiving to talk about denial. So.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye.
thank you.
Great discussion.